Good morning and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut, a biweekly conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers about policies and programs that are of interest to older residents in Connecticut. My name is John Erlingheuser and I'm the Senior Director for Advocacy and Community Outreach here at AARP Connecticut. And I'm very pleased to be joined by one of our great AARP volunteers, Lottie Prushinski. Thanks for being with us today, Lottie. Now, I would like it if maybe you could tell the folks a little bit about what you do here at AARP, a little bit about your background and where you're from, and anything you'd like our viewers to know about you before we get started with Chairman Gillett.
Thanks, John, for inviting me. I live in Southington, and I started volunteering with AARP about 10 years ago, teaching the AARP driver safety course. And another driver safety volunteer was telling me about other volunteer opportunities with AARP. And I started doing some other volunteering, including advocacy, meeting with our state representatives, talking with them about the challenges facing us as we age in Connecticut, and addressing issues that are important to the 50 plus population. And that includes our utility bills. So I do the electric choice program, I do some caregiving and fraud watch, just to name a few of the very rewarding opportunities. And I really enjoy doing this. I've made a lot of new friends. So again, thanks for inviting me, John.
Thanks so much, Lottie, for being with us. And you're indicative of the so many great volunteers we have that do so much work in so many areas. And we really do appreciate it. You guys are the backbone of all the work we do here at AARP. So it's also my pleasure to welcome back to Coffee and Tea this morning, the chair of the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, Marissa Gillett. So Chairman Gillett, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about PURA and what it does, and then we'll kind of get into some of the nitty gritty about the various things happening in the utilities world for us here in Connecticut.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me back. As you said, I am currently holding the title of Chairman of the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, or PURA. I'm going into my 5th and final year of my term this year. And by way of background, I'm still relatively new to Connecticut. I moved my family up here a couple of years ago for this position, and I was really pleased to accept this great honor from Governor Lamont. And I came from the state of Maryland, where I held a similar position at the Maryland Public Service Commission, which is the equivalent of PURA. So my background is with regulatory commissions and regulating utilities. I'm a lawyer and engineer by training, and I really enjoy digging into not just the regulatory aspects, but the policy aspects of the energy world. And there's really so much that we've done over the past couple of years and so much more to do that I've really enjoyed my time here and looking forward to the conversation this morning.
That's awesome. And it's really great to have somebody sometimes from the outside to actually, look at things with clean eyes and fresh eyes and not the influence of politics or the pressure that sometimes comes on from people that are too close to the system. So it's been really great having and working with you. So now I'm going to turn it over to our great volunteer, Lottie, and she's going to dive into some of the things that we care about here at AARP.
Thanks, John. So Chairman Gillett, electric customers, and that includes myself, have seen a large increase in their standard service rates starting this past January. Can you tell us about your views, why that is, and maybe give us some information of ways that we can manage that increase?
Absolutely. So everyone is probably painfully aware of at this point as the first round of bills have come out. Standard service rates for customers that elect to receive supply from their utilities doubled effective January 1st of this year. And we, historically see standard service rates increase from January 1 to June 30th, and then decrease from July 1 to December 31st, excuse me. But the increase that we saw this January was really unprecedented. And, we've heard lots of different explanations. Mostly in New England, it ties back to the region's over-reliance on natural gas, which when I explain this, folks find this very counterintuitive because they say to me, well, aren't we talking about electricity? And we are, But because the region generates electricity primarily with natural gas, that means that we're very subject to supply constraints, not just with natural gas that flows through pipelines, but also liquefied natural gas that comes into the system that we have to compete with Europe and Eastern Europe for as well. So, there are a lot of different reasons that it came to pass January 1st. And one of the most frustrating things for me has been that it's not really within PURA's control to offer a lot of relief here. I've had to explain to the legislature a number of times, look, you all decided in 1998 to pass a deregulation bill. And deregulation literally means that you have removed the regulatory authority from PURA over the supply rates. So, when I'm explaining our role nowadays with respect to supply rates, I describe it much more as an administrative process where we're doing things like checking to make sure the utilities have not passed on any profit margin or markup on that rate, make sure that they have abided by the competitive procurement rules that we've set out. So we're really kind of poking around the edges at it. And I think that's unfortunate to say the least, considering what we're facing right now. But there are a few things that customers can and should do. We welcome folks to visit energizect.com, go to the rate board and see if there is a competitive offer that you could be eligible for. Due to the leadership of your organization and our advocacy jointly over the past couple of years, there have been a lot of improvements to the customer protection rules when it comes to third-party suppliers. There is a great piece of legislation 2 years ago that removed the ability of suppliers to charge cancellation fees. So if you go to energizect.com and you find an offer that is more competitive than standard service, you should feel free to enroll. Our biggest piece of advice right now is mark your calendar for May 15th. Which is about the time that the standard service rates for the second half of the year will be published. And at that time, you should look and see, is the standard service rate going to be more competitive than that third-party offer? And if it is, you can switch. You can switch that day with no cancellation fees. It doesn't matter if the third-party supplier has offered you a 3-year lock-in rate. You can switch that day with $0 charges. And if it is competitive, then mark your calendar again for November 15th and make sure that the rate remains competitive going into the next year. So this is not a set it and forget it option, but it is an option that customers have. And it's one that my family has taken advantage of. And there are savings to be had, but you really need, it's a buyer beware situation, and you really need to stay on top of that.
Thank you. That was a lot of great information. And that energizect.com website is a really easy place to navigate and get a lot of great information. So thank you.
And I'll just add, there are plenty of reasons to get mad at Eversource and United Illuminating, but the irony of it is they make no profit off of standard service, right? So, I mean, it's even, yes, it's not PURA's fault that this increase happened because we are deregulated, so you have very little control over standard service, but UI and Eversource make no profit off of that either. Isn't that correct, Chairman Gillett?
That is correct. And I agree with you. There are plenty of reasons to be upset with the utilities, lots of ways that they can improve in the areas that they're responsible for. When it comes to supply, I think one thing we'll be looking at in conjunction with stakeholders like you, with partners in the legislature, is we are going to take a close look at those procurement rules and make sure that there's nothing else that we can ask the utilities to do. Because they're investor-owned utility and they're driven by profit, when you're asking them to do something that they don't earn a profit on, it's not necessarily in their interest either. So, we're undertaking this great initiative called performance-based regulation, and maybe there's a role there to layer on a performance incentive when it comes to the issues of supply procurement. So I'm not going to say that it's, they're totally excused from this exercise, but as it is currently, they do not make a profit, and that's one of the things that we check for.
Great points, Chairman Gillett. So, we talked about this, and that's always a hot topic now. As you said, those bills are starting to come in this first billing cycle. But what are some of the important proceedings? You're the regulatory body. There are a lot of areas that you do regulate different utilities, whether it's telecom or water or electric. So what are some of the important proceedings that are taking place that are important to ratepayers? And I know there's only certain things you can say about those proceedings because they are like official court cases, but within the rules of those proceedings, what are the ones that people should be interested in?
Sure. You are probably already guessing this because your volunteers have been active in submitting testimony in several of these. But we have two pending distribution rate proceedings before us, one from Aquarian Water and one from United Illuminating. And distribution rate proceedings, unlike supply rate cases, distribution rate proceedings are where PURA really has the opportunity to flex its muscle. We're looking at the distribution rates that these companies want to charge to recover costs associated with infrastructure, but we're also looking at the policies and the terms and conditions of service. We're looking at where they want to put their resources, whether we're talking people resources or money. So rate cases, while it's never a good feeling to have a utility coming in and asking for more money because it's going to hit your pocketbook, they are the opportunity to really dig under the hood and redirect the utilities towards new initiatives. And, I have been a big proponent of getting the utilities in for rate cases because one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, why are our rates so high? And it's difficult to answer that when you haven't been under the hood and in the books of these utilities. So I'd say people need to pay attention to the Aquarian rate case decision, which will go final mid-March, and the UI rate case decision, which will go final in late August. And that's an important time to check up on your regulator and see where we landed, how we listen to the different points of view, what new policies we authorized, what new direction we gave. So I'd really stay on top of those. And outside of those rate cases, we're busy in lots of other dockets too, setting new program designs and policies for how we're going to modernize the grid, new rate design, like the new low income rates that we established and will go into effect next year. So with a couple dozen dockets right now, I think we're up into the 90s with an active dockets right now. There's no shortage of things to pay attention to at PURA.
And that's great. And AARP was instrumental working with the legislature and helping PURA to come up with that low income rate. And that's something we're really looking forward to give some relief to low and moderate income residents in Connecticut. So that's on the way. And we appreciate you mentioning that, Chairman Gillett. So I'll turn it back to Lottie. Lottie.
Yeah, so how can members of the public ensure that their voices are heard in those various proceedings that you mentioned?
That's a great question. So it's one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about the past couple of years. PURA is a quasi-judicial agency, which means we operate like a court. So there are a lot of barriers, natural barriers to participation. And that's really a shame because we can only make decisions based on the evidence in front of us. So it's really crucial that we do get people to, whether we're coming in as individual ratepayers or coming in as a group under the AARP banner, we want folks to be in our proceedings, providing written or verbal testimony. And sometimes we even get municipalities or others who will formally intervene in our proceedings and become actual parties that put up witnesses and cross-examine folks. So if you have time and interest, one of the easiest ways to get involved is to email us. We also take comments by phone. We do most of our proceedings by Zoom, but emailing us at pura.executivesecretary@ct.gov is one of the quickest and easiest ways to get your comments to us. If you know the docket number, you can put that in the subject line. If you don't, and you just know generally I'm trying to comment on the Aquarian rate case, put that in the subject line and our folks will be able to get it where it needs to go. And it's great. It's really impactful when we receive comments, particularly large numbers of comments that indicate your position on a case. it's also hugely impactful when we receive individual emails that say, provide evidence that we can rely on when we're looking at these cases. So while it's great to receive testimony that says I'm opposed to this rate increase, if you can go further and say, I'm going to pick on Aquarian because they're in right now, but if you say, I don't want Aquarian to receive a rate increase because their customer service, this X, Y, and Z, this was my experience with them. And you're giving us actual testimony and evidence that we can cross-examine them on during the hearings or use to develop the record. We really like specifics, and those specifics can come in from one person and make a difference. So I'd strongly advocate that folks take the time to write in or show up to our hearings and offer comments. Whether you provide your comment in writing or verbally, it carries the same evidentiary weight. So it's really up to the individual.
That's great, Chairman Gillett. Thank you for that. I know we often get a lot of requests from folks to try to tell them how they can participate in those various proceedings. So we've learned a little bit about what PURA does and doesn't do in terms of regulation and how various utilities and non-utilities bills affect them. So let's talk a little bit about an area where we can work a lot more cooperatively, because we work cooperatively at PURA in a lot of ways, but obviously you're the kind of adjudicator of the issues, and we're usually somebody that's participating either as an advocacy organization or as a party to a case. But when it comes to what the legislature does to kind of set policy on utilities and things that even aren't utilities, we are able to work a lot and cooperatively so that we get the best impact for the residents of Connecticut. So I'm going to take two questions and maybe roll it into one, because we do want to make sure we cover some ground here. So what are some of the initiatives that the legislature is looking at? I know there's a lot of activity because of the rate increases on standard services that we discussed, and you touched upon it a little bit there in the beginning. But what is the legislature looking at doing around the energy and utility space, and particularly around electricity? And then what are some of PURA's priorities for the legislature, that they would like to see them take up? So that's kind of two questions in one, but try to tackle it the best you can, and we look forward to your response.
So much for the question. I really enjoy partnering with AARP during the legislative sessions. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think we made really great progress together with some of the consumer protection bills. And I think there's an opportunity to partner this session. There's definitely going to be momentum to do something. And, there was a bill last session, raised House Bill 5203, that I see elements of already cropping up in some of the proposals this session. And I recall describing that initiative last year as an attempt to start to peel back the layers of an onion, because when it comes to energy policy and the regulation of the utilities, from my perspective, we talked about me coming from another state. From my perspective, the statutes have, kind of compounded over the decades in Connecticut to really shift the risk all the way towards ratepayers and away from utilities, as opposed to being balanced. And what I mean by that is a lot of the statutes guarantee them cost recovery, as opposed to the traditional utility regulatory model, where they're coming in and showing that their actions were prudent and reasonable. If you've already tied the regulator's hands and said, thou shall give them cost recovery, there's not a lot that we can do there. So I'm really looking forward to the legislature picking back up some of those things. And, some of these topics really shock people in terms of understanding what's in their rates right now. For example, I don't think the majority of ratepayers know that lobbyist costs, advertising, marketing, trade association dues, communications, all of those are pass-throughs in rates currently, as are things like taxes. So I often get the pushback, well, I don't want to attack insert utility here because they're the biggest taxpayer in my district. Well, actually, those taxes are largely, by and large, a pass-through to customers. So you're actually, your biggest taxpayer is your ratepayer in that situation. So I think One thing I'm hoping the legislature takes up this session and that we get some momentum behind is really bringing to the light, at least making it transparent about what you're recovering in rates, because it's not just the poles and wires at this point that we're recovering. So I'm looking forward to that. And, other initiatives that PURA specifically will be pushing are geared towards transparency and accountability too. And we have a very specific agency bill that's looking at making improvements to what's called the matching payment program, which helps customers who are behind on their bills pay back those arrearages over the course of a year. And we found that that program has some barriers to participation and success. So that is one thing that we're going to be very focused on at the legislature, is making some corrections to that statute so that we can get more people both eligible and successful in those programs.
That's awesome. And AARP in New York worked on, we supported the legislation you spoke of last year to disassociate utilities from recovering some of those costs that are not really important to how they deliver electricity or water or whatever the case may be to residents. And I know in New York, we passed legislation to deal with that. Unfortunately, the governor of New York vetoed that, but at least it's helping provide some momentum to shed light on those hidden costs that seem counterintuitive that the utilities should be getting recovery from. So we look forward to working with you on that, certainly moving forward. So we're coming close to time. So I'm going to throw it back to Lottie for our last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. So where can we as ratepayers go to have our questions about a bill from any of the various utilities that you regulate, or maybe someone wants to file a complaint about the service they're getting, or just to get more information?
Great question. So the first thing I'd say is PURA is now offering a PURA 101 Roadshow. I've done a couple dozen of them at this point. So if you would like to partner with an elected official or a community center in your jurisdiction, feel free to reach out to PURA, and we will come into the community and give a presentation about some of the most frequently asked questions, how to engage with PURA. And we have a couple of those recorded sessions that are available on our website. We also have a pretty active YouTube channel, which I know is not everyone's cup of tea or coffee, but one of the clips that we have on there is we've done it's about a 6-minute presentation, a narrated walkthrough of your electric bill for both Eversource and UI that tries to explain what the components of the bill are and what the cost drivers are and who regulates each section. So there are a couple of existing tools out there. But if you're someone that wants to have specific questions answered or wants to talk to a live person, PURA does maintain a call center, 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. And that toll-free number is 1-800-382-4586. And we are also available by email at PURA, so PURA.information@c2.gov. And we are more than happy to take questions and comments through either of those channels. And we really welcome them, because a lot of the feedback that we get, even if we can't address your specific issue, sometimes leads into bigger investigations, whether we're holding the utilities accountable for violating orders that we have already issued that a customer has stumbled onto, and we're like, wait a second, we already dealt with that. Then we can use our enforcement authority, and often we have been able to generate restitution for customers in their individual situations as well. So we really welcome customer complaints, inquiries, questions, what have you, by phone or email.
That's awesome. So Lottie, any closing remarks from you, Lottie, before we wrap up?
No, but I see there's a lot of places where we can get information. I just thought it was just energizect.com, but there are a lot of places that, we can go and learn more about this. So thank you so much for all that great information. I appreciate it.
And I want to thank you, Lottie, for all the great work you do. And I want to comment to Commissioner Gillett before I give her the opportunity to say any closing remarks, is that AARP would love to partner with you on doing a virtual PURA 101 presentation. We have something called Webinar Wednesday, and we present webinars every single Wednesday to our members virtually. And you can go to aarp.org/CT and go to the events tab and find out about all of them. But you'll be hearing from us, Chairman Gillett, to set up a PURA 101 with you. So any closing remarks from you, Chairman Gillett, before we close out?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you during this session and the previous session. Look forward to doing the PURA 101, and I really look forward to your all's engagement this legislative session, because there's a lot of momentum to build and deliver on, and it's a long session, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to move the ball forward, and I really appreciate your all's engagement, and I look forward to partnering with you.
Well, thank you so much. Once again, this was our guest, very special guest today, Chairman Marissa Gillett from the Connecticut Public Utility Regulatory Authority. I want to thank Chairman Gillett, thank Lottie Prushinski, our volunteer, and thank all of you for joining us once again for our latest edition of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut.